In the autumn of 2000, Japanese census workers were moving through neighborhoods across the country, knocking on doors for the National Population Survey. One census taker was assigned to Kamedo, a quiet residential district in East Tokyo. His list included the Rek Kamedo Green Mansion, a relatively upscale complex popular with young professionals starting their careers. For 3 consecutive days, September 26th through the 28th, he stopped at room 604. No answer. He knocked, waited, listened, silence. It wasn't unusual. The tenant was probably at work. Tokyo apartments were often empty during the day, so he moved on, planning to return. On Friday the 29th, he came back one more time. That's when he noticed it. A sour, almost chemical stench drifting from the unit's ventilation fan into the corridor. Faint, but unmistakable. The kind of smell that makes you pause. The kind that doesn't belong in a normal apartment building. Uneasy, he contacted the building manager. The manager arrived around 1 p.m. Together, they stood outside room 64. The hallway was quiet. No music, no television, no movement inside. The manager tried the handle. It turned, unlocked. The two men stepped into the apartment and into a wall of heavy, stagnant air, thick with the smell of decay. The living space was still, undisturbed, almost peaceful. In the bedroom, they found her. 28-year-old manga artist Yoko Yoshida. She had lived alone in that same room since 1995. Now she lay face up on a futon, wearing only a t-shirt, undressed from the waist down. A white cloth had been placed neatly over her face, as if someone had taken a quiet moment after the act. Her skin had darkened. Her body had bloated. Forensic experts would later estimate she had been dead for at least 10 days. There were faint marks around her neck. She had been strangled, with bare hands. Nothing in the apartment appeared disturbed. No drawers pulled out, no furniture overturned. On her desk sat her wallet, bank book, cards, and roughly 3 million yen in cash, untouched. Despite her state of undress, there were no signs of sexual assault, no foreign DNA, no indication of a struggle. It was as if she had known the person standing over her. One detail unsettled investigators more than anything else. A spare key, one Yoko always kept inside her apartment, was found lying in the hallway outside her door. Beyond that, there was nothing. No fingerprints, no CCTV footage, no forced entry. Everything pointed to a single chilling conclusion. Yoko had either willingly let her killer in, or the killer already had access. Detectives began with the basics. Who did she know? Who had access to her life? Any conflicts? Any threats? As they reconstructed her world, they realized Yoko's social circle was far wider than they expected. She worked as an independent manga artist under the pen name Tsukisaki Cool. She wrote and illustrated self-published BL doujinshi, niche LGBT romance stories, circulating within Tokyo's underground comic scene. She wasn't famous, but within that community, she was known, respected. She had friends, collaborators, acquaintances, and devoted fans. Her stories were bright and humorous, a little eccentric. Those who followed her work adored her. But could someone have adored her too much? At the time, many doujin creators printed their real home addresses in the colophon of their books, a leftover quirk from 90s indie publishing culture. It was normal, practical. It was also dangerous. Anyone who bought her work knew exactly where she lived. Any fan, any stranger, any opportunist. And Yoko, described by friends as kind and trusting, may have opened the door without hesitation. But her publicly listed address introduced another possibility. Throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, doujin artists rarely earned enough to survive on art alone. Many were approached by scouts from the adult entertainment industry, men who frequented conventions looking for young, creative women. They would buy a book, copy the address, wait outside the artist's apartment, coincidentally bump into them, and then pitch a lucrative part-time opportunity. It was a predatory system hiding behind politeness. And according to people who knew her, Yoko had recently begun working nights at a members-only club in Shibuya. There were rumors she was also serving as a call girl for wealthy clients. Some of those clients, it was said, were minor celebrities and comedians. Inside her apartment, police found expensive designer bags, high-end jewelry, and luxury clothing, items friends insisted didn't match her personality. She preferred quirky thrift store finds. Investigators believed the luxury goods were gifts. Payment, perhaps. The 3 million yen in cash suggested she had been earning well. Reports claimed that at her peak, she made between 30,000 and 50,000 yen per night. But demand had reportedly begun to decline. She was getting older in an industry that valued youth. Friends said she was planning to quit her nighttime work and move back in with her parents, which raised a troubling question. Had one of her clients refused to let her leave? Police interviewed her coworkers and employer. They questioned acquaintances. They tried to identify regular customers. Nothing solid emerged. Some believed the club was shielding powerful clients. Others suspected those clients themselves quietly influenced the investigation. With no forced entry, no clear suspect, no forensic breakthrough. The case began to stall, and Yoko Yoshida's death slipped into a growing pile of unanswered questions. 4 years later, just as the case seemed to be fading into the background, it was suddenly dragged back into the national spotlight. A program on Terabi no Ikara, a long-running investigative series on TV Asahi, known for revisiting cold cases with dramatic reenactments, psychic consultations, and public tip lines, decided to feature Yoko's murder. And that's when things took a strange turn. The show introduced a British man named Chris Robinson, who called himself the Psychic Dreamer. He claimed he had previously worked with MI5. He insisted he could see crimes in his sleep, dreaming details before investigators ever uncovered them. According to him, he had already seen Yoko's killer. Through what he described as his mind's eye, he claimed to watch the suspect leave Yoko's building, walk to JR Kamedo Station, and board a blue streetcar. The image, he said, was vivid, clear enough that he produced a sketch. In his drawing, the suspect was between 25 and 35 years old, around 165 centimeters tall, medium build, South Asian, with deep-set features. It was dramatic, it was specific, and it was reckless. Within hours of the broadcast, dozens of callers contacted the show, accusing various foreign residents in the area. Suspicion began spreading, not based on evidence, but on a televised vision. Among the callers was a man identifying himself only as Mr. A. He claimed to be Yoko's manager. He told producers he possessed a letter Yoko had written shortly before her death, a letter describing harassment by a foreign stalker. It was exactly the kind of explosive twist a TV special thrives on. So they invited him on air. The letter read, "I might be killed in 2 or 3 days. I have a feeling that I'm being watched. The person is a fan of my work and lives in my neighborhood. He writes strange notes to me every day, and he isn't Japanese, which scares me even more." It sounded chilling, too chilling. Behind the scenes, the show quietly had the letter analyzed by a handwriting specialist. The verdict was absolute. The handwriting did not match Yoko's, it matched Mr. A's. On camera, he was confronted by a former police interrogator. Under pressure, he broke. He admitted he wasn't Yoko's manager at all. The letter was forged. He had written it himself. Why? Jealousy. As a fellow cartoonist within Yoko's circle, he felt overshadowed by her modest success. He insisted he had nothing to do with her death, but admitted he wanted attention. He wanted the spotlight to shift. Police never formally named him as a suspect. No charges followed. But the damage was done. The broadcast fueled years of speculation about foreign stalkers. Innocent residents were quietly suspected. Tension simmered. Mr. A faced no repercussions for attempting to redirect suspicion. Nor did Chris Robinson. One was a proven liar. The other, perhaps delusional, or perhaps something worse. And it raises an unsettling thought. If an innocent man had been arrested because of their claims, would either of them have stepped forward to admit they fabricated the story? It seems unlikely. Still, Mr. A's confession about envy planted another seed of doubt. Could someone within Yoko's own artistic community have been involved? The doujin scene was known to be tight-knit, insular. When investigators and reporters began asking questions, Yoko's inner circle reportedly closed ranks. Some interpreted that as suspicious, but members of the community later defended themselves, saying police openly mocked their work and treated them with contempt, dismissing their genre as weird. They claimed their coldness was self-protection, not concealment, and despite years of speculation, no evidence ever surfaced implicating any of them. Then another theory emerged, one that shifted attention away from fans, clients, and stalkers, and back inside the building itself. A Japanese commentator and YouTuber, Himuro Eski revisited the case and pointed out several details that didn't quite add up. First, the smell. The census worker visited Yoko's door multiple times between September 26th and 28th. He noticed nothing unusual, no overwhelming odor. Yet on the 29th, the stench was suddenly powerful enough to seep through the ventilation fan into the hallway. Second, the spare key. It was supposedly found in the 6th floor hallway only after police arrived, despite residents and the census worker passing through that same corridor for days. Third, the lack of struggle. No signs of a fight, no foreign DNA, and yet Yoko's lower body had been left exposed. Himuro Eski proposed a chilling possibility. What if Yoko wasn't killed in her own bedroom at all? What if she had been killed in another apartment within the same complex, and her body was later moved back to room 604 using the key she carried? In that version of events, the killer wasn't an obsessed fan or a wealthy client. It was a fellow resident, or someone with private access to the building. Someone who knew she was planning to move out soon. Someone who panicked when the census worker kept returning. According to this theory, the killer may have entered the apartment again on the morning of the 29th. Switched on the ventilation fan to push the smell outward, left the door unlocked, dropped the spare key in the hallway. A carefully staged scene. One designed to point investigators toward a simple explanation: a lover with a key, a private encounter gone wrong. It's only a theory. Police have never endorsed it, but it highlights how many pieces of this puzzle still don't quite fit. 25 years later, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police continue to list Yoko Yoshida's murder as an active investigation. One of many unsolved cases from the late 90s and early 2000s that quietly slipped through the cracks. And unless new evidence surfaces, unless someone finally speaks the truth about what happened inside, or perhaps outside, room 604 may remain buried in silence. Japan has long been described as one of the safest countries in the world. Visitors often notice small children walking to school alone, commuters asleep on packed trains without clutching their bags, and people casually leaving laptops unattended in cafes. For many, danger feels distant, like something that happens somewhere else. But that image doesn't tell the whole story. While overall crime rates are low, violence against women and girls remains deeply underreported. Beneath the surface of order and politeness lies something quieter, an undercurrent that relies on trust, routine, and lowered guards. In a place where people feel safe, all a predator needs is a window of opportunity. Nana Sakoma was born in 1978 in Chiba Prefecture, just east of Tokyo. Her parents divorced when she was very young. After that, she lived with her mother and grandmother in a modest single-story apartment in Omiodai. To support the family, Nana's mother worked long nights as a hostess at a local snack bar. While she was gone, Nana's elderly grandmother took care of the house, but she was gentle, relaxed, not strict. It wasn't unusual for Nana to stay up late, or to wander the neighborhood after dark. And why would anyone worry? Omiodai was close-knit, familiar. Neighbors recognized one another. Most people knew the bright, well-mannered Sakoma girl by name. In 1991, Nana began her first year at Omiya Junior High School. She had just turned 13. Teachers described her as confident, outgoing, full of energy. She quickly formed a wide circle of friends. She was at that age where personality begins to bloom, where childhood starts giving way to independence. On October 26th, just after midterm exams, Nana spent the day with 3 female classmates. They laughed, talked, and stretched the afternoon into evening. When the sun set, none of them wanted it to end. So Nana suggested they go back to her apartment. Her mother was working the night shift. Her grandmother wouldn't mind. The 4 girls rode their bikes to Nana's flat and spent the evening watching TV, chatting softly, trying not to wake Granny in the next room. By midnight, hunger crept in. They checked the fridge, empty. Nana suggested a quick trip to the nearby convenience store for onigiri and snacks. It was close, easy. But when they arrived, the store was already closed. One of the girls remembered another convenience store, a 24-hour mini-stop, about 4 kilometers away. It sounded far, but they were 13, and it felt like an adventure. So they agreed. They pedaled through the quiet streets, laughing into the cool night air. 30 minutes later, they reached the store, bought snacks, and began riding back toward Nana's apartment. At around 1 a.m., they entered a darker stretch of road in Tabataw. Poorly lit, quiet, the kind of place that feels different after midnight. Nana was leading the way. She turned her head to check on her friends behind her. In that split second, her front tire struck a large fallen branch, likely blown down by a recent typhoon. The impact sent her tumbling from her bike. It wasn't a terrible fall. The others rushed to her side, helping her up, brushing dirt from her clothes. And then, a voice. "What do you think you're doing?" The girls froze. A man stood a short distance away near a billboard, around 50 years old, wearing a horizontally striped long-sleeve shirt, black trousers, and a black knitted cap. His face was round, his eyes long and sharp, his cheeks flushed red, his hands were buried in his pockets. He stepped closer. The tone of his voice wasn't concerned. It was harsh, authoritative. He claimed he was a local youth guidance counselor. Under Japanese regulations, he said, minors weren't allowed to be outside past 11 p.m. without a guardian. At the time, volunteer youth counselors did exist across Japan. They worked to prevent juvenile delinquency and promote healthy development. But most of them were women. Most worked in groups. Few patrolled past 9 p.m., and they wore visible badges, armbands, and identification. This man wore none of those things. Still, the girls were 13, and he sounded official, confident, certain. In the quiet darkness of that empty road, surrounded by shadows and the hum of distant wind, the four friends stood facing a stranger who claimed authority. And in that moment, none of them knew. They were no longer just four girls on a late-night bike ride. They were being tested. This man, however, showed no identification. Instead, he immediately threatened to call the police. Then he paused. He said he might reconsider if they had a good excuse for being out so late. The girls lowered their heads. They were frightened, embarrassed, caught outside after midnight. They said nothing. "You've been sniffing paint thinner, haven't you?" he snapped, glaring at them. The accusation made no sense, but the anger in his voice was enough to paralyze them. He said one of them would have to accompany him to a nearby police box and explain everything properly. He scanned their faces, then pointed. "You, come with me." Nana. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was obedience, maybe it was the instinct to comply with someone who sounded like authority. She didn't argue. She simply nodded and followed him. He led her toward a small side road branching off Route 126. As the two figures disappeared into the darkness, the man turned back to the remaining three girls. "You don't have to wait. Go home." One of them hesitated and asked about Nana's bicycle. Without turning around, he replied, "I'll load it into my truck and bring it later." His truck. None of them had seen a truck, but they didn't question it. They were 13. They watched until Nana vanished from sight. Then, unsure of what else to do, they rode back to her apartment complex and waited outside. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. Then an hour and a half. The night felt heavier, the silence louder. As they sat there growing more anxious by the minute, two boys from their school happened to walk by. The girls told them everything. The boys immediately sensed something was wrong. It didn't sound right. None of it did. They urged the girls to wake Nana's family, but Nana had the only key. So they banged on the apartment door until her grandmother finally stirred awake. Shaken and confused, the grandmother called Nana's mother at work. Her mother rushed home. Together, they searched the entire Wakaba district. They retraced the bike route. They checked the narrow alley where Nana had last been seen. There was nothing. No sign of Nana. No sign of the man. At 4:20 a.m., with nowhere else to turn, they called the police. And what officers told them was chilling. There were no youth guidance counselors on duty anywhere along that route that night. The man had lied. From that moment on, it was no longer a misunderstanding. It was an abduction. Authorities flooded the area. They knocked on doors, canvassed streets, and released a sketch based on the girls' descriptions. Gradually, witnesses began to come forward. At 10:30 p.m. on October 26th, hours before Nana disappeared, someone had seen a suspicious man resembling the sketch wandering near the back of a driving school in Sakazuki-cho, about 1 kilometer from the abduction site. At 1:20 a.m., shortly after Nana was led away, a truck driver reported seeing a girl walking with an adult male at the Sakazuki intersection roughly 260 meters from where she fell. At 2:15 a.m., another witness claimed to see a girl and a man walking along Monreal Street, about 300 meters from Chiba Station. There were also unconfirmed reports of a man and a girl heading toward a residential area near that same station around the same time. The sightings formed a loose trail, but it led nowhere. More than 150 officers combed the 4-kilometer radius around the abduction site. Fields, drainage ditches, construction zones, vacant lots, nothing. No physical evidence, no ransom demand, no confirmed vehicle, and no further leads. The man's calm, confident approach suggested this might not have been his first attempt. He had spoken like someone who had rehearsed the role. Yet, investigators couldn't link Nana's disappearance to any other local cases. Despite leaflets, sketches, media coverage, and years of effort, the case stalled. Time moved forward. The other 3 girls grew up, graduated, started families of their own. But Nana never came home. Her grandmother died within a year of the disappearance, reportedly from shock and overwhelming guilt. In 2001, the apartment building was demolished. Nana's mother eventually moved away. She still visits shrines, she still bows her head, still prays for her daughter's safe return. Though with each passing year, that hope feels harder to hold on to. Online, the case continues to be debated. Some people struggle to believe the abduction was purely opportunistic. The man's comment about putting Nana's bike in his truck suggests he may have been following the girls in a vehicle. But none of them heard an engine. None saw headlights. Others focus on the branch. That fallen branch Nana struck, lying perfectly across a dark, unlit stretch of road. Was it really blown there by a typhoon, or had it been placed strategically? A trap. Was the man hiding nearby, watching, waiting for some unsupervised child to stumble into his setup? It sounds calculated. It sounds risky. But how many nights might he have gone out searching? How many times might he have tried before? And how many times might it have worked? Yet perhaps the most haunting theory is the simplest one, that he was simply there, ready, waiting for an opportunity. And the only thing separating ordinary-looking monsters from their victims is timing. One Japanese YouTube channel, Incidents, Society and Life, has explored a more specific possibility, that a man known as Suspect A, arrested in the late 1960s for a series of assaults, could somehow be connected to Nana's disappearance. A theory that suggests this wasn't random at all, but part of something much older. Suspect A had once been convicted of impersonating a juvenile officer, or even a police officer, to lure school-age girls into isolated places. Stairwells, storage rooms, anywhere out of sight. He was eventually caught in Nakano while attempting to coerce another girl. The pattern was disturbingly specific. In 1991, Nana Sakoma was also taken by a man pretending to be a youth guidance counselor, an authority figure tied to minors. At the time Nana vanished, Suspect A would have been around 52 years old. Witnesses described the abductor as being in his 50s. The overlap is hard to ignore. The YouTube channel Incidents, Society and Life has speculated that Nana's abduction may have been impulsive, a psychological relapse triggered by opportunity, that the suspect could have taken her to a temporary residence, dormitory, or workplace, and that whatever happened next escalated beyond control. Today, Suspect A is 86 years old, and he still lives close to where Nana disappeared. But the theory remains unproven. Over the years, another rumor surfaced, one even more unsettling. In the 1990s, National Route 126 was allegedly used by North Korean agents operating inside Japan. That led some to wonder whether Nana, like Megumi Yokota and others, had been abducted by foreign operatives and smuggled out of the country. But there was never any concrete evidence supporting that claim. And witnesses consistently stated that the man who took Nana spoke with a natural Japanese accent. If evil existed in this case, it was likely domestic. For many, the only question that remains is this: was Nana trafficked or was she killed? If she was trafficked, she would be 47 years old today. If she was murdered, her remains have never been found. And there is one final devastating detail. Because the statute of limitations expired before Japan revised its laws, even if the perpetrator were identified today, legally, he could never be prosecuted. Justice, in the strictest sense, may already be out of reach. But Nana's story is not the only example of trust being weaponized in Japan. Fortune tellers, mystics, spiritual advisors, they are everywhere. Small shops on busy streets offering palm readings and tarot sessions for a few thousand yen. Most are harmless, selling comfort and vague reassurance to those seeking answers. But not all of them are harmless. In the case of 74-year-old Hirohito Shiba, the reality was far darker. Unlike street corner psychics, Shiba operated from a private residence in Higashiyamato, a quiet bedroom community in West Tokyo. Neighbors began noticing something strange. Women would enter his home. Assistants, clients. But very few were ever seen leaving. After just one visit, he somehow convinced them to abandon their families, their jobs, their obligations, and marry him, one by one. By early 2023, he had built a polygamous cult, 9 wives and 3 children. Outsiders were baffled. These women weren't simply followers. They were devoted, obsessed. Shiba wasn't charismatic in a conventional sense. He wasn't young. He wasn't particularly charming. But he was manipulative. He began forming his network as early as 2000, shortly after establishing his fortune-telling business. He claimed that in a dream he had discovered a powerful seduction spell, a mystical ability to attract and control women. What he described as magic, most would call calculated psychological abuse. He placed advertisements in local papers seeking fortune-telling assistance. Women between 20 and 49 responded. From there, the pattern was almost identical each time. He isolated them. He planted fear. A demonic spirit is haunting you, he would claim. Only I can protect you. He positioned himself as both threat and savior. And for women already searching for meaning, already open to the supernatural, the manipulation worked. Fear mixed with naivety, dependency deepened. Gradually, they moved in. Once under his control, they were allowed to leave the house only to work and bring money back. On average, each wife earned around 80,000 yen per month. Every yen went directly to Shiba. But he wanted more. More money, more wives. He ordered his existing followers to recruit coworkers. Some complied, but not every new target was as vulnerable as the first. When manipulation failed, Shiba escalated. In 2006, he was arrested and indicted after threatening a woman in her 20s, forcing her to live with him and his other wives. Prosecutors stated he intimidated her into what he called consensual intercourse. It wasn't consent, it was coercion. When she resisted his spiritual claims, he changed tactics. If you don't do what I say, he told her, you'll be chopped up, minced, and processed at a nearby factory. And if she ever tried to leave, she would be rounded up. The words weren't mystical, they were explicit, and they reveal something chilling. Not all predators hide in darkness. Some sit in living rooms, offering protection, while quietly building prisons around the people who trust them. At least some of Shibuya's wives played a role in keeping one woman trapped inside the house. Thankfully, she eventually managed to escape, and she went straight to the authorities. But shockingly, the media didn't treat Shibuya's crimes as the danger they truly were. Headlines mocked him as the harem man, reducing something dark and calculated into something almost comedic. He was accused of polygamy, illegal in Japan, yet technically, he hadn't broken that law. Each time he married, he divorced the previous wife shortly after, taking their names and identities in cycles. On paper, he was never married to more than one woman at a time. Because of that loophole, the only charges that stuck were coercion and intimidation. In court, he looked the judge in the eye and promised he would stop living with multiple women. He said he would send them back to their parents. "I never want to do anything like this again." The judge believed him. He received a 1-year and 6-month sentence, suspended for 4 years, meaning he didn't spend a single day behind bars. After the 2006 case, desperate parents gathered outside Shibuya's home to rescue their brainwashed daughters. Locals say they stood there day and night for months, but the daughters never came out. Shibuya installed nearly 10 security cameras and posted signs around the property reading, "Keep out." Eventually, exhausted and defeated, the parents left. Years passed. Neighbors noticed that the once young women, blonde hair, high heels, ultra miniskirts, slowly aged inside that house alongside Mr. Shibuya. He never needed chains. He controlled them with fear. First curses, then spirits, and later, aliens. In mid-2022, a teenage girl, whose identity remains protected, was lured to the house by Shibuya's 43-year-old wife, Jackie. Once inside, Shibuya appeared wearing a black hooded robe. He cornered the girl and forced her to watch hours of footage about aliens and UFOs, nearly 6 hours straight, determined to make her believe. Then he told her, "You're going to die soon. You'll be abducted by aliens, skinned and eaten. They'll replace you with a copy of yourself." The only way to avoid that fate, he claimed, was to let him save her. At first, she resisted, but over time, he wore her down. Afterward, he tried to silence her. "If you tell anyone, your family, the police, I won't be able to protect you." He demanded she return for more so-called alien resistance sessions. This continued for 2 months. Then, in December, he tried again. Another teenage girl was brought to the house. The script was nearly identical. "You'll die soon. You'll be taken by aliens. The only way to survive is for us to become a couple." In both cases, Jackie actively supported Shibuya's delusions, reinforcing the fear and helping convince the girls that extraterrestrials were real and imminent. But this time, something changed. The second girl told her family, and her family called the police. On February 7th, 2023, officers arrived at Shibuya's door. Instead of surrendering, the elderly man sprayed bear repellent through a crack in the door, injuring 6 officers in the face. Police forced their way inside. What they discovered painted a disturbing picture of a tightly controlled, cult-like household. Shibuya and Jackie were arrested on suspicion of constructive forcible intercourse. Unlike 2 decades earlier, the Japanese public demanded a serious sentence. In court, Shibuya remained defiant. "Do you want to know why I believe in aliens and UFOs?" he asked. "It's because I've met one. I was told there was a plan to reduce the world's population. Japanese women were being targeted." He claimed the only way to save them was through relations with him. He denied forcing anyone. "I only told them what appeared in my dreams." The jury didn't buy it. While awaiting sentencing, both Jackie and Shibuya were allowed to return home and continue living with the remaining women. Then, in December 2024, Jackie was found dead inside the residence. Very little information was released about the circumstances. 1 month later, in January 2025, just 1 day before his sentencing hearing, Shibuya was found dead inside the same house. Authorities ruled that he had taken his own life. With his death, the legal case ended. But the questions didn't. How many women had he controlled over the decades? How many are still living with the trauma? And how did one man maintain such psychological dominance for so long without real intervention? While researching this case, I was reminded of another chilling figure, Futoshi Matsunaga, a Japanese mind control killer whose story reveals just how powerful manipulation can be. Thankfully, in Shiba's case, he never escalated to forcing his victims to harm others like Futoshi Matsunaga did. But history shows where that kind of unchecked, perverse narcissism can lead. And perhaps the only relief in this story is that his operation was finally exposed before it spiraled even further. Before she became a viral meme, Yuka Takaoka was, by most accounts, an ordinary young woman trying to carve out a life in Tokyo. Born in China, she moved to Japan at just 2 years old. She grew up quietly in Hokkaido, shy, soft-spoken, the kind of girl classmates described as sweet but reserved. She preferred drawing, anime, and online communities over crowded social scenes. After graduation, she moved to the capital to study design. But like many young people arriving in Tokyo, stability proved elusive. According to reports, she eventually drifted into the nightlife industry, first working at a girls' bar, then transitioning into full-time hostessing in Kabukicho. What many people outside Japan don't realize is how circular that world can be. Hostesses spend their nights comforting lonely men. They flatter them, listen to their problems, make them feel seen. But when their shift ends, many fall into the same emotional dependencies they witness in their clients. In Shinjuku, it's an open secret. Many hostesses spend their earnings on hosts, the male counterparts to their own job. It becomes a cycle of loneliness. The fantasy relationships they perform for customers are the same fantasies they begin craving themselves. And according to former coworkers, Yuka slipped into that loop almost immediately. That's how she met the man who would soon dominate her thoughts, a club fusion host known as Luna. In nightlife circles, he was rising fast. Stylish, effortlessly charming, soft-spoken, skilled at making any woman feel uniquely important, remembering tiny personal details, leaning in close, laughing at her jokes, offering carefully measured chivalry. For most customers, it was a performance they knowingly paid for. For Yuka, it was real. Her thoughts became consumed by him. She admired him the way fans idolize celebrities, intensely, without emotional boundaries. She began visiting Luna 3 times a week, reportedly spending over 50,000 yen per visit. The debt piled up quickly. To sustain those visits, she started working for a delivery health service, a common euphemism for escort work. She hated it, and she never told Luna the truth. Instead, she claimed she had a wealthy sugar daddy who funded her trips and gave her spending money. Luna thanked her for going on those vacations. After all, the more she spent at the club, the higher his host ranking climbed, a public scoreboard directly tied to earnings. And Luna was ambitious. Before hosting, he'd struggled financially and had little to fall back on. He had no intention of slipping down the rankings. So he said what needed to be said. I love you. To him, it was part of the job. To Yuka, it meant everything. After his shifts, he sometimes took her to love hotels to keep her emotionally invested, something he also did with other clients. Yuka always paid. Eventually, she leased a fifth-floor apartment near his workplace, convinced they were destined to be together. She told friends she wanted to devote herself entirely to him. If he missed her calls, if he left messages unread, if he refused to come over, she threatened to jump from the rooftop. He had to be available. He was her boyfriend, at least in her mind. Luna may have cared about her in some way, but he was still a host. His livelihood depended on being publicly unattached and emotionally accessible to many women. A visible girlfriend could ruin him. He tried to soothe her, saying that maybe, hypothetically, he'd quit in the autumn so they could be together properly. He meant it loosely. She heard certainty. But he continued seeing other clients, and slowly it broke her. In her journal, she wrote, I want to be a tragic heroine. How can he look at other women? Killing him would be best. If I kill him, it will be eternal. There will be no pain after that. I don't know anything other than him. By May 2019, the tension had curdled into something darker. On the 22nd, after drinking with a female client, Luna stopped by Yuka's apartment to help clean and hang curtains. Exhausted, he ran a bath. He dozed off in the tub. Later, he collapsed into her bed and fell asleep. While he slept, Yuka picked up his phone. She scrolled and found photos of him sitting beside another woman at the bar. There was nothing intimate, nothing romantic, just work. But in Yuka's unraveling mind, it was proof of betrayal. And betrayal in her story could only have one ending. At around 3:50 a.m. on May 23rd, Yuka quietly walked into the kitchenette. She picked up a fruit knife. Then she returned to the bedroom. Luna was still asleep. She knelt beside him, watched him for a moment, and then she drove the blade into his abdomen with enough force to pierce his internal organs. Luna jolted awake, confused more than anything. At first, he felt no pain. What are you doing? He asked. That's when she pulled the knife out. A catastrophic mistake. As the blade tore free, the pain finally hit. Luna staggered into the hallway, leaving a thick trail of blood across the floorboards as he crawled toward the exit. He made it into the elevator, down to the lobby. Yuka followed slowly, calmly. She asked him if he loved her. Yes, he said. Just call an ambulance. No, she replied. Let's die together. A neighbor, hearing his faint cries for help, called emergency services. When officers arrived, they found the exact scene that would soon spread across the internet. Yuka sitting beside the bleeding host. Her shirt soaked in his blood, her face blank, distant. She was casually talking on the phone with a friend. That image detonated across Japanese Twitter, and then globally. Instantly, she was labeled the real-life yandere. In Japanese fiction, a yandere is a character who begins sweet and affectionate, only to become obsessive, possessive, and violent. And Yuka, with her blunt bangs, delicate features, and eerily calm expression, seemed to embody that archetype with unsettling precision. Online communities rallied around her. Some obsessives even launched a crowdfunding campaign to bail her out, raising around $3,000. Meanwhile, Luna slipped into a coma for nearly a week. Doctors gave him just a 20% chance of survival. Miraculously, he pulled through. He spent over a month in the hospital, initially unable to walk or speak. Nightmares plagued him. visions of Yuka crawling through his hospital window. The fear became so intense that he requested to be moved to a windowless room. And yet, he later said he bore no hatred toward her. He claimed he understood her feelings and wanted to become a better person himself. In an interview, he said, "If possible, I want people to live a normal life rather than pay forever for their sins." After the attack, he rebranded himself as Phoenix Luna, a nod to surviving death and being reborn. Despite permanent liver damage that prevents him from drinking, he became more popular than ever. Marketed as the host worth killing for, his earnings reportedly soared. As for Yuka, she immediately confessed and underwent psychiatric evaluation. In handwritten letters later released to the media, she wrote, "I stabbed him because I love him so much, I couldn't help it." She described the act as a kind of shared death. She insisted she never meant to harm anyone else. Prosecutors argued that her obsession had crossed into delusion, that she had built an entire fantasy around a man whose job was to manufacture emotional intimacy. This wasn't simple jealousy, they said. She wanted total possession. And when she felt him slipping away, she chose destruction over abandonment. In December 2019, the Tokyo District Court sentenced her to 3 years and 6 months in prison, a punishment many considered shockingly lenient for attempted murder. Others pointed to her confession, visible remorse, and clean criminal record. Media outlets reported that she reached a civil settlement with Luna, allegedly around 5 million yen, roughly $40,000 at the time. She also sent him a direct apology letter, repeating, "I'm sorry," more than a dozen times. The judge took that into account. After her release, something unexpected happened. Yuka became an online icon. Fan art, cosplays, tribute edits, memes. She appeared in TikToks, profile pictures, aesthetic mood boards, a symbol of the yandere fantasy brought to life. Her admirers called her the beautiful criminal, mirroring the way some once romanticized viral mugshots. The more mainstream society condemned her, the more her online cult grew. Even now, years later, she maintains tens of thousands of followers across social media platforms. To some, her story is a warning about the emotional machinery of host club culture. To others, disturbingly, she's an icon. But stripped of the memes and aesthetic edits, the reality is far less romantic. Yuka Takaoka was a lonely young woman whose obsession spiraled into delusion and nearly cost a man his life. Hey guys, H2NS7 here. Thank you so much for staying all the way to the end and listening. These Japanese cases always leave me with mixed feelings, part mystery, part psychological deep dive. And I genuinely find them some of the most fascinating stories to explore. Having help with translations definitely allows me to dig a little deeper and make sure the details are right. This one especially felt like a mix of everything: manipulation, obsession, loneliness, control. Not just mysteries, but human stories that spiral in ways you don't expect. I'd really love to know what you thought about this collection of cases. They're all very different, but somehow connected by the same underlying themes. I'll be back very soon with more stories for you. As always, thank you for your continued support.